Well, it's about time this was spotted. Let's begin. The article says that UK's second largest grocery chain, Sainsbury's, revealed it has made much less money to keep profits down and has not been using high interest of inflation as a cover for making higher profits. Oh no, of course not. The latest cost revelations come from the supermarket's giant's top boss, Simon Roberts, among claims by critics accusing the food retailers of greedflation, which means putting up prices to bolster profits at the expense of customers amid a cost of living crisis. The chief executive of Sainsbury's told the BBC, "We made less profits year on year, and that is because we made really conscious decisions to keep our prices as low as we could." He explained Sainsbury's and other supermarkets had to spend money to battle inflation to avoid passing the rising costs on to customers, and insisted Sainsbury's had absolutely not been profiteering. Sainsbury's made £690 million in pre-tax profit in the year to March, a fall from £730 the previous year. Britain's competition watchdog has said it would look at how the grocery market is working, as there have been growing calls for clarity over how food prices are set. General inflation has fallen to 8.7%, and energy prices and some wholesale food prices have started to fall back, but food price inflation remains stubbornly high at 19%. Here and no rest. Mr. Roberts also said pay rises for Sainsbury's staff of more than 10% last year had contributed to rising prices, but were locked in, while he hoped the cost of other inputs such as energy and food commodities would continue to fall. Tesco's, Morrison's, Asda, Aldi and Lidl have all raised staff wages in recent months. Sainsbury's is not the only grocer hitting back at criticism over profiteering. Marks & Spencer chief executive Stuart Mashin, hope I pronounced that right, also denied the sector was guilty of greedification. Well, have you seen their prices anyway? And said his company has also invested to protect customers from the full force of inflation, impacting its profit margin because it was the right thing to do. I know they're saying that food inflation is around 18-19% or whatever it was, but to be honest, it seems it's more like 30 to 50% with the way they keep putting up their prices every time people go through the store. And I'm not just talking about Sainsbury's, I'm talking about all supermarkets, it seems. That's not just the cost of food either, because if you buy one of those shopping bags or bags for life, whatever you want to call them, the cheapest ones, they're usually around 20 to 30p wherever you go, it seems. But if you go to Morrison's, you will find that the last time I went there, they're actually 50p for one bag. I mean, who knows how much they are now? I'm guessing it's probably 60 or maybe possibly more. And that's the cheapest, remember. So if anything, that's even more of a kick in the gonads, isn't it? And don't even get me started on energy prices. I mean, thankfully, from the 1st of July, they are meant to come down. Although how much we'll see of it is another matter entirely, of course. It does often quite seem that it's the poorest that are hit hardest, because if you take a can of beans, for example, which was about 20 or so p in Asda before all this nonsense was going on, it is now around 25p, which, correct me if I'm wrong, but my super awesome math skills tell me that that is a 25% increase, which is certainly a lot more than what they're saying, and it just gets worse from there on other things. Take a jar of pasta sauce from Tesco's. Their cheapest version used to be 38 pence if I remember rightly, but at the height of all this, that actually went up to 70 odd, or near that amount, which is obviously around double, but thankfully that has fallen to 47 pence. I'm guessing probably a lot of people didn't bother buying it, or they might have got a bit too greedy. But then again, who knows, I could be wrong. But quite often we hear with companies, don't they, that they're doing everything for the public they can and they're struggling to survive and make a profit, but yet suddenly they announce their figures and they're like millions and millions, and sometimes in some cases even billions of pounds in profit, like the petrol and diesel and energy companies themselves. So let's face it, they can't be really struggling that much, can they? Rishi Sunak, or wishy-washy as I like to call him, has vowed we must, and we will, cut the number of people moving to the UK after net migration hit a record high of 606,000. Around 1.2 million migrants arrived in Britain last year, and 557,000 emigrated, official figures showed. Tory MPs warned the high numbers are unsustainable and putting a strain on public services. Mr. Sunak admitted the 24% increase is too high and insisted he is taking tough action to reverse the trend. He said, "I know Express readers looking at the migration figures will be clear in their minds that they are too high, and I cannot agree more. Unprecedented world events and the lifting of COVID restrictions have led to record levels of immigration to the UK. While there is much that we should be proud of, and was right that we opened our hearts and homes to 114,000 people fleeing war from Ukraine and stood by our commitments to 52,000 Hong Kongers, we must, and my government will, bring down the number of people coming to the UK. Stopping the boats and tackling illegal immigration is one of my top 5 priorities. but I am also committed to reducing legal migration. And this is why earlier this week the government announced tough measures to limit people bringing family members with them when they come to study here. We have seen that number spiral and we will not allow it any longer. I am confident that this action on student dependence will deliver one of the single largest reductions in net migration we have seen. But I am not complacent. We will keep the numbers under constant review and make sure we are using the freedoms we gained from leaving the EU. We took back control and created a points-based system so that we can own our future. And that means our own growth and skills, not relying on foreign labour and having an immigration system that works in the best interests of the UK. David Cameron, though, vowed to cut net migration to under 10,000 when he was Prime Minister, but that figure has constantly increased since he made the pledge. Well, to be honest with you, it's going to be quite interesting to see how Rishi does with his bold talk that he's making there, especially as how it seems that he doesn't even want to leave the ECHR, which not leaving it will make deporting people so much harder, won't it? Because they'll say, oh, my human rights this, my human rights that, when in quite a lot of cases, it seems like that's a defence a lot of illegal immigrants are using to try to stop getting deported. And then, of course, we go on to his version of Brexit, the Windsor Framework, which in my opinion actually shackles us to the EU via the back door of Northern Ireland. So if he's willing to do that, to be honest, it makes me wonder how serious he actually is with his pledges, especially as he's meant to be a Brexiteer. But if anything, what he's doing with the Windsor Framework kind of goes against that in my view. And of course, remember, this isn't the only time we've heard ministers talk strong about stopping the illegal boat people, so let's just say I'll believe it when I see it. And don't get me wrong, I've got nothing against people who come here legally. It's the illegal part that I do have a problem with. Although personally I do think he has a point with stopping students bringing over their families over here, because whilst it is nice to have your mum and dad and whoever else close by, let's face it, quite a lot, if not all of our UK students who go to our UK universities don't tend to bring their mum and dad with them, do they? So to be honest, I'm struggling to see why these people should do as well, especially if some people may try to use that as an easy way to get in the UK when they might not be entitled to. Although admittedly, I'm hoping some checks would at least be done on that, so hopefully they still won't be able to come in if they've got criminal records or committed serious crimes against people or whatever else. Tens of thousands of people who claimed universal credit in the previous financial year were incorrectly paid a £650 cost of living payment, new data suggests. More than 8 million households received the £650 payment last year, which went out to people on certain means-tested benefits, including universal credit, job seekers allowance and pension credit. The funds went out in 2 instalments, with the first payment for £326 and the second instalment for £324. New government figures reveal, though, that £330 million worth of payments went out to people who were incorrectly receiving universal credit at the time. The report relates to payments made by the DWP. Some people on tax credits also received the payment, but these were administered by the HMRC. Individuals who received these payments in error may be required to repay the funds, and the report states that the estimates for the amount of overpayments were produced by assuming that fraud and error could only occur when claimants were incorrectly receiving the qualifying benefit. The study also said, though, that in this situation the claimant does not have entitlement to the qualifying benefit and therefore they are overpaid the full amount of the cost of living payments. The report found, though, that £60 million in overpayments were due to claimant error, while some £40 million were due to a DWP error. The report states overpayments relating to incorrectly paid low-income benefits accounted for around £9 in every 10 overpaid on cost of living payments at 4.6%, which is £380 million in the financial year ending 2023. Well, here we go again. Another government balls up, it seems. I mean, how hard is it for the DWP just to put some data in the computer and then pay out the correct amount of benefit? I mean, it's not rocket science, is it? And admittedly, it does say that some was due to claimant error or possibly fraud, and those cases, they definitely should be paid back and possibly prosecuted depending on the seriousness of the false claims. But for the DWP to make an error, it's just ridiculous in this day and age. Why are checks put in place to make sure things like this don't happen? Because that's a massive amount of our taxpayers' cash, which actually could be spent on other things. And to more than likely have to repay that amount of money when it wasn't your error in the first place is a big ask, isn't it? I mean, obviously it has to be repaid, but that should be spread over an amount of time that the claimant can actually do without putting them in the crap. Because let's face it, it's not their fault, is it? And if the HMRC can do it properly, then to be honest, there should be no reason why the DWP shouldn't also be able to do that. Maybe, who knows, they might need a swift ruler on the gentleman's sausage. I mean, I don't know. Either way, though, they could do with going back to school and learning their times tables, in my opinion. Anyway, if all goes well, I should be back at some point tonight, so make sure you click that subscribe button down there so you don't miss my next video. I'll see you in the next one.